All right. What's up, everybody? We have Jovan Buha in the building, everyone. So excited to have you as a special guest on Rings and Things, home of Lakers exceptionalism, Lakers greatness, and the home where banners aren't optional, they're tradition. Jovan, my guy, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited for this weekend. I think the Lakers are going to get some good news, so preparing for that. But things are going well.
Awesome, man. I'd love to hear that. So let's dive right into the elephant in the room. Let's talk about slim Luka, skinny Luka, rookie Luka. I think there's been a myriad of terms out there describing this new, an improved, transformed Luka Doncic. Um, and it's he just got a feature on Men's Health magazine, and it talks about how he's doing 16-hour fast, 250 plus grams of protein. I really want to get your thoughts on how much of this is real, because we've seen in the past Luka have these viral moments in the off season where okay, he's taking his regiment seriously, his workouts and exercise and this and that, this is serious. But how much of it do you buy into it? And if this is real, and if we do get a semblance of like rookie or sophomore Luka, what are the areas of game of his game will we be able to tap into as a Laker coming into the next season?
I think it's real, and I think you just have to look at the photo shoot. Like, of course, when you're working out, you're mid pump, like you're gonna look a certain way, and you could doctor
Right.
it up a little bit with the lighting, or maybe like oil or whatever. But like, you can't really fit. Like, we've seen him do interviews, we've seen him actual videos of him, shooting and taking half court shots and interacting with people, and like, there's a
Yeah.
clear transformation there. I also think, I don't know about you, but if you've ever had an unflattering photo taken of you, like typically the next week or two, I'm going to be like in the gym more, like eating a little bit better. And I think for him,
Yeah.
like he went through that on the national stage where you had the fallout from the Dallas situation of they were
Hmm.
criticizing his conditioning and just his focus and how seriously he takes things. And like to have the jokes that were made about him on a national stage for multiple months, like I think that's going to motivate anybody. So I think it's
Absolutely.
real. I think it's at least going to be real for this season. Obviously, we've seen throughout his career his weight and conditioning has fluctuated, so I can't say that this is how he's going to be for the rest of his career. But I think for this season, which is what matters, of course, at least in the short term, I'm expecting arguably, potentially his best season of his career, which puts him in line to potentially win his first MVP. Now, in terms of the parts of his game that will be different, I think if you look at the way that he played as a Laker, one of the big differences between his tenure as a Laker versus his time in Dallas was he struggled as a finisher. His finishing around the rim wasn't the same. His mid-range game was not the same. So I think that kind of herky-jerky pace that he plays with, that deceleration and acceleration, I think that will just be at an even better level. He'll be able to get to the rim more, put some more rim pressure. And I think defensively, people were citing the blow-by rate and the blow-by percentage of that Minnesota series. I think that's an area where his lateral quickness, his ability to close out, his ability to cover ground as a help defender will be better as well if he's in better shape. So I think there's multiple ways that he will be a better player. Even so, like he was pretty good as a Laker. I
Yeah.
think he was still a top 5 player as a Laker, even not being in necessarily the best shape coming off of that calf injury. So I think that there's no ceiling to what he can do next season. We've already seen this guy average 34, 9 and 9,
Yeah.
having a near MVP season, lead his team to the finals. Like that is like the floor, I think, for him going the next season.
Yeah, it's definitely like I think of all the off seasons that in recent years, this has been for me personally, one of the more exciting off seasons because of this transformation that Luca has gone through. But then also the free agency moves, and we'll kind of get into that later in the show. But I'm excited, man. I mean, I think like a motivated, a rejuvenated Luca coming in, and then like you just said, alluded to it like right in the beginning of the show, where we got some good news. Hopefully, over the weekend. This is it. This is the next era of Los Angeles Lakers basketball. Luka Doncic is the face of the team, and that's evident in him recruiting and pitching. So for all the people on the timeline, mostly non-Laker fans thought like, Luka's never going to sign. He's pouting. He looks sad. We get it. I mean, it was a shock. Like it was a shock to the whole NBA, all of us, fans, you covering the team and the broader NBA. Like that trade came out of nowhere. No one knew that was about to happen. I was sitting on my dining table. I thought Shams got hacked. I'm like, I feel bad for this guy. He's the only newsbreaker at the time, and he's hacked most likely. I mean, why would Dallas Mavericks ever trade away a once a generational type player? But you know what? The Lakers benefited. And now he is this rejuvenated, Luka Doncic on the Lakers, and I think he's going to come back with vengeance this upcoming season. Now, I think this is a perfect time to talk about his running mate. And I listened to your show with Daman, your latest episode, and you guys made a very interesting point about the number twos in the NBA, right? So I believe you guys had LeBron as like the top number two option in, all of the NBA. And I 100% agree with you guys. But, the offseason has been, to say the least, I mean, if you've covered LeBron, if you follow LeBron, there's always drama. There's always, these media is always pulling strings to one way or another to, keep the media filling the gaps within the dog days of the summer. So I want to also get your thoughts on this LeBron James situation. And how much of it is noise? And is there actual like friction between him and the front office? Because this is the first time LeBron has opted into his player option in his contract. He's always extended, whether it's 1+1 deals for flexibility. And, is there a point where we I just alluded to it. This is Luka's Lakers now. Like this is, and LeBron's never been in this position where there's another player on the team where it's his team and not his team. I'm kind of confusing a little bit, but you know what I mean with it, where, there's another team and superstar where he's sharing the spotlight. So I want to get your thoughts on the whole LeBron and Lakers drama and situation. And are the Lakers really trying to push LeBron out of here?
I mean, to your point, it's arguably the first time in LeBron's career he is not the best player on the team. And I know late in AD's tenure with the Lakers, you can maybe debate like who was the better player at various points, but still it was LeBron's team. He was the 1A, AD was more of the 1B, even if AD, just based on his defensive contributions, was probably the better overall player, especially last season. I'll say I think most of it is noise. I do think there is a little bit of friction. And I said that a few weeks ago when I said I don't think things are in the best place. Now, I was trying to kind of couch it a bit and not go like too much into it because I've just tried to stay out of that whole storyline and the drama. But I think one of the more telling things to your point was that they did not discuss any form of an extension past next season. And the Clutch side says that they did not ask for it and we're not looking for an extension past next season, and the Lakers from their side just did not offer it and we're not really interested in that. So I think that in and of itself just kind of speaks to the state of the relationship, that we don't know yet if next season's LeBron's final year. As of now, it's looking like that could be the case, but he could also potentially play another year, maybe 2 more years. And the fact that they were not discussing any framework of him on the roster beyond next season, I think, again, like actions speak louder than words. And regardless of whatever they want to say publicly or even privately, that to me what was telling that of just the state of where things are currently at. Then he obviously opts in, and then he has that statement, and there's really no way to like frame that statement positively. We can say like it's a little noisy or just him whatever, but there's no like positive nature to that statement. And if you want it to be like, if it was a positive thing, you just don't release the statement, right? Like you didn't need to do that. Not everyone who opts in releases a statement about how they feel about things, right? So that clearly what was a bit of a distraction and created some more buzz and noise around the whole situation. So he certainly fanned the flames of this offseason discourse. If he doesn't release that statement, I don't know if we're having this conversation in this manner right now, right? So some of it was self-inflicted for sure. But I would say, I think, again, like I'll just double down on what I previously said, like things are not in the best place that they've been. And I think they haven't been in the best place since the Westbrook trade. And I think that was the sort of dividing fracture between LeBron and Clutch and the front office. But I think things have been better at times over the last few years, but certainly right now, I'm not saying they're in a bad place. And to be clear, I'm just saying that they have been in a better place. And again, I look at the contract situation as something that to me was very telling about the state of how both sides view the partnership moving forward.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. So let me take it this way. So if, the front office, and I don't know how much of this is true, but there's been clear reports where Lakers are focused on the 2026 free agency or 2027. Like that's their kind of future or North Star look into what the next phase of basketball. How much of that comes into play with LeBron, right? Because, he's still an all NBA level talent. He was sixth in MVP last season. So however you slice it, like he's still worth the max money. And I know there's opinions within the front office or within, the Lakers brass where there's got to be a point or tipping point where we need to kind of, look towards the future and build around Luka and how much, clearly, if you look into free agency, like most of these moves or players, like it's already pre-decided. Like it's either via sign-in trades or, you're traded during the trade deadline. Like you don't really get these big name kind of players signed in free agency anymore. Like free agency is kind of like boring nowadays. Right? It's like you're fighting over like role players at this point and who's going to make the MLE and whatnot. Right. And I want to get your thoughts on that part of it. Like, I feel like a little bit of it is, okay, the 2026, 2027, like that flexibility to have 50 million around that, like available in cap space, you're just like open to be able to make a lot of moves with a lot of other teams that are just kind of looking to live in this new CBA where like you're either like jockeying between the first apron or the second apron. So want to kind of turn it that way where, okay, is that the goal with kind of pushing LeBron out or not really pushing him out? Because I know, the Lakers, they pride themselves in respecting legends and players. And this, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this has been like LeBron's longest tenure with a team.
Once he starts next season, yeah.
Once he starts next season. So longer than the Caps, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and he's broken so many records. He's delivered a championship, in the year the late great Kobe Bryant died. So there's a lot of history there, right? So I want to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's more of a post-LeBron plan than anything. So people Project 2027 was a term that some fans have used, or even looking ahead to 2026. I think there's several ways that this can play out, but I do think it's more so a post-LeBron plan of, and that's not to say, to be clear, like that they're trying to push him out. It's just the reality of the situation is if he retires after this season or he goes to play elsewhere, or he plays maybe one more year as a Laker and then retires, like whether it's 2026 or 2027, one of those two off seasons, there's a high likelihood that LeBron James is not going to be a Laker due to, again, either him retiring or going somewhere else. So the Lakers need a plan. They need to pivot in a different direction. And the direction that they're trying to pivot in is either landing Giannis Antetokounmpo or Nikola Jokic, or maybe a different superstar player becomes available. And they're going to be armed starting with the 2026 draft with, going into that summer, upwards of 50 million in cap space. They can have 3 tradable first round picks if they don't trade their first round tradable pick this year. They could have Austin Reeves as a potential sign and trade guy. You could have Rui as a potential sign and trade guy. You'll potentially have Dalton Connect, depending on what you do with him. So they could all of a sudden have this package of like, you could trade an Austin and 3 firsts and a Dalton for a star and get in them and potentially kind of take on that player if you have that. You could acquire players via trade and use your cap space that way, so you don't have to necessarily have matching salary in that scenario. So you could get a Giannis, a Jokic, or someone else, and of course that's going to be plan A. The likelihood of that happening is probably under 50%, right? Or even under like 30%, but it's the Lakers, so you never know. We did think the Luka trade was going to happen and they pulled it off. So then it's pivoting to plan B, and maybe that's like something of of a gap year or something, or trying to figure out, like, can we position ourselves for 2027 to then try and make that type of move and maybe once again kind of sign 1-year deal. So I think they're evaluating multiple paths forward, but I think a big thing is going to be how much longer is LeBron playing? How much longer is LeBron a Laker? And then how does that affect this? Because if he's willing to maybe take a pay cut and stay for an extra year, I could see that being an option. But if there is a path for them landing a Giannis or a Jokic at the expense of potentially keeping LeBron, I think they'd be foolish to turn that down, right? So because it is about the future at that point. So I think that there's a lot to navigate. And again, we don't even know, like, LeBron, it could be the final year of his career. We don't know yet, for sure yet. So once we have that clarity, that will, I think, determine their plan to some extent. But I view it more as a post-LeBron plan rather than I just don't see 2026 or 2027 them having LeBron, Luka, and a Giannis and a or a Jokic. Like, that's just unrealistic. It's more so Luka plus another superstar. For now, that's LeBron, but I think in the future they're trying to make that somebody else.
Yeah. I think the main term that I took away from your explanation is just flexibility. I think they're looking to just have that flexibility to make whatever move that comes to them at a given time. And that's kind of what happened with the Luka Doncic trade. Like, if I think I talked about it in my last episode where, had they made some of those decisions or trades with like role players that would have fit AD and LeBron timeline, they wouldn't have had the players or pieces to kind of make the trade for Luka Doncic, right? Like that first round pick that they gave up for Luka, even Max Christie. We weren't really sure if Max Christie was a 3-and-D player until last season. Like he definitely showed out. So flexibility seems like the name of the game for the Lakers front office. And that was also evident in how they approached the free agency. So let's talk about quickly how the roster is starting to shape out, and I really want to get your thoughts on JJ Redick. We were talking about it in the pre-show. So in comes DeAndre Ayton, we get Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, and then Adu Thero. I think that's how you pronounce the name. And then no Alex Len, Markieff Morris, Jordan Goodwin, Shake Milton. I think I got all the pieces there. So definitely, we've definitely gotten younger, definitely a little bit more athletic between Thero and Ayton. And Jovan, a lot of these moves, we didn't give up any draft compensation. There was some of the moves that they made on draft night, which was great moves, and in my opinion, just to send money and picks to collect and move up to get a young and budding star in 3-and-D type role, which I think would fit the archetype of what JJ Redick is trying to run on this team. And then I've seen your breakdown videos. You've gone in with the DeAndre Ayton videos, the Marcus Smart, and Jake LaRavia. So I really want to kind of juxtapose the decisions the front office has made in being flexible, being patient, and bringing in these pieces and these guys in year 2 of JJ Redick.
I think JJ is going to have a lot more flexibility with this roster. I think they have better two-way balance. I think there's better depth. I think, to your point, like, they got a bit younger, flipping a DFS who's 31, going to be 32, into a DeAndre Ayton who just turned 27. Marcus Smart is 31, but has missed the last couple of years due to injuries. So maybe he's coming into training camp a little bit fresher than previous seasons. And then Jake LaRavia, who's, I believe, 23, 24, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember off the top of my head, but like, they got younger with that trio overall, and I think especially deeper. Like, to me, going back to last postseason, JJ only trusted 5 guys. I think you could slide DeAndre Ayton and Marcus Smart into that and replace DFS, and now you're up to 6 guys. And then I think Jake LaRavia is going to earn the trust of JJ Redick. So I think it's going to be a minimum of 7 guys next season. And then Gabe Vincent is probably due for some positive regression at some point with his shooting and his offensive play. Vando has had back-to-back injury riddled seasons. So first healthy off season for Vando. Maybe he looks more like the 2022-23 version. So all of a sudden you could talk yourself into this team being at least 9 deep. And then Maxi Kleber is coming off of a major injury, and he's had a healthy offseason. Jackson Hayes is now in a backup role that's more suited for him. Dalton connects in year 2. So like there is a path here where this is a team that's 10, 11 deep. Now I still think there's some clear holes on the roster, particularly on the defensive end. I think most of their defensive guys lean far more defensive than offensive. So you have to kind of do like the whack-a-mole with lineup construction and some of that stuff. But I think JJ Redick has better weapons at his disposal going into next season than he did this season. And I think there's just a clear identity with this group. Now, in terms of JJ, like I was really impressed with his defensive chops last season, the game planning, especially in the second half of the year. They had that 24-game stretch. They go 20-4, best defense in the NBA. That preceded the Luka trade, that included the Luka trade, and that also included after the Luka trade. So that was like the highlight of the season, to be clear. And they had a couple wins over the Knicks and the Celtics and the Pacers and the Warriors and like the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Timberwolves, like the Clippers. They beat basically every good team in the NBA with the exception of OKC, who then they beat at the end of the regular season. So like they had a really impressive stretch there that I think if you take a lot of what they did defensively and some of the game planning that went into that, then you add in now a full offseason, full training camp with Luka and LeBron and Austin together and figuring out how those pieces fit offensively. Now you have a real legit versatile rim running short roll big in DeAndre Ayton, and you have some more shooting now with Laravia. Like, so I think that the pieces again make more sense and fit, and it's just a deeper, more versatile roster. And I think JJ is going to have a lot at his disposal.
Yeah, what's crazy is that they were a 3 seed last year, and I think the team has gone better. Like like everything you mentioned, they've improved in a lot of areas. There's still some holes, like you said. Yeah, I think they need, probably a little bit more legit backup center. They need more defense for sure. Like whether it's point of attack or just more bodies to that can play two-way. Like you said, that there's some that more sided on defense. So you mentioned something about identity. That's what I'm kind of struggling with, right? There's so many offensively gifted players. I think like the starting lineup is like heavy on offense, and we'll see what version of Marcus Smart we get. I mean, I think, the last 2 years he's been injured, but he's also been in kind of none of that, winning situations, right? So like there's something to buy into here. And I think he's definitely going to have a big impact on this team. I think, I forget where I heard it. I know JJ mentioned it in last season, but the team was super introverted. There wasn't like a lot of communication or like people were just like very quiet, and that's fine. Yeah. I mean, that's just personality wise, but I'm a Lakers fan. I live in Boston. Marcus Smart is someone who like is very vocal on and off the court. And I think he's going to have an impact like from the start of training camp, and he's going to be in everyone's ear, which is great. Like, and I think for us to bring in Ayton, I think that's a perfect type of player among, Luka and LeBron as like great table setters for him is going to be huge impact wise. But just want to understand, and get your thoughts on the identity as part of the Lakers for next year.
Yeah, so I've been the one talking about the introverted nature of the locker room, and I think that Marcus Smart to me is the spiritual successor to Dorian Finney-Smith, and I think like because that was a big thing that DFS came in and changed the tone of the locker room. He also changed, I think, on the court, was the leader in plus minus, and I think he unlocked their small ball looks, but he made a really big impact in the locker room. That was even before they traded for Luka, who DFS and Luka are very close, and that's the player he's played the most with throughout his career, he being Luka. So now bringing in Marcus Smart, someone that Luka signed off on, someone that Luka recruited, I think he can come in and have a similar impact from a leadership and just being a vocal guy who is not going to be afraid to challenge Luka or LeBron, get in their face if he needs to, like call them out when they miss a defensive rotation. Like I think you need guys like that. You need vets like that. And that's the type of guy that Marcus Smart is going to be. I think there are questions, of course, to your point about his injuries and stuff, like how good is he? I think he's still been a pretty good defender, but I think he's fallen off a bit on the offensive end. And I think just in general, his shot selection and the turnovers and stuff can be questionable at times. So like, I think the best version of this current team features him as a starter and someone playing at least 28, 30 minutes a night and probably sliding Rui to the bench. But if Marcus can't get back to being that type of player he was a couple of years ago, and Rui has to start just by virtue of like being that much better than him, then I think that puts a little bit of a ceiling on the current version of this team unless they end up making a trade. So I think this team, to your point, like they're probably going to lean into the offensive end even more.
Yeah.
Never really made sense why they weren't able to put it together, just having the firepower that they had. So if they do keep maybe the current projected starting lineup with Rui in there, you have 5 guys who on any given night could drop 15 plus, even 20 plus. You have spacing with Austin and Rui spacing the floor. You can do 2-man game with Luka and LeBron, Luka and Ayton, LeBron and Ayton, even Austin and LeBron or Ayton. So you have all these variations offensively and all these different ways to get into your offense and different actions. I think defensively that group is clearly limited, and you're relying on Rui as a wing stopper. You're relying on Austin as a point of attack guy. That is going to have you behind the 8 ball in terms of where you're at defensively. So they're going to have to stagger a bit and put in Vando and Smart and Gabe and kind of junk it up that way. But then that also comes obviously with some offensive downgrades. So I don't envy like that part of JJ's job at figuring out the rotation. I think there's going to be some interesting rotation battles for sure. But I think this team to me projects as like a top 10, if not top 5 offense. And then I think probably closer to league average defensively. I know they had the stretch of 20-4, but like I've said this recently, before that stretch, they were, I believe, 24th in defensive rating, like the games preceding that. And then the games after that stretch, they were 20th in defensive rating. So for 58 of the 82 games, they were a bottom 10 defense. So I think realistically, like maybe league average is probably like the upside for them, barring a trade. So I see them being like maybe the 6th best offense and like the 14th, 15th best defense. And that's still a pretty good team.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think with the defense, they're definitely somewhere in the middle of what it was in terms of like the reality of the situation. So what I wanted to hear, my ears perked up, is trade, right? So we have all these expiring salaries. We were able to keep the 1st round pick. I think we have 1 2nd round pick to offload as well in the war chest. Are you, what camp are you in? Were you in the camp to, make a move in the offseason so you have kind of your roster set going on from game 1? Or are you more of okay, let's just see what the options are? Because, just reading the tea leaves on Twitter and articles that come up and reports, there didn't seem to be, that many wings available, and that's always to be the case. Like they're sought after like crazy. I mean, like Bane went for like 3-4 1st round picks. Like they're not cheap. So, and I know the Wiggins deal was, maybe there was some conversations, but never came to any fruition. And the asking price, I think you reported on your show that it was Dalton Connect, a 1st round pick, and Rui, which is, I think, in my opinion, too much to give up in terms of just not just like from a Lakers standpoint, but just in general, that's just too much to give up for a player that's beyond 30, and they have 2 years of on their deal, and who has some inconsistency and motor issues. So it's definitely not a home run deal, but the fit is obviously there, right? Like, so have you heard of any kind of wing prospects that they're looking into with the Lakers are looking into, and would you kind of make the trade now or wait to the deadline where it's a little bit more of a buyer's market?
I'm firmly in the camp of making the trade now. And this is something that I was advocating for last summer and advocating for the summer before, because it's now going to be, assuming that things stay at the status quo, like it's going to be 3 straight off seasons that the Lakers did not make a player related trade. They obviously traded up or, to acquire Adu Thero in the 2nd round. But like that, I don't really count that as like making a trade. You're mainly using cash to pay your way up. And like, I give them credit for identifying him and for actually going after that and like executing that. But I don't consider that personally a player related trade. So you look at 2023, they ran it back after they made the Western Conference Finals, and they made a couple of upgrades with Taurean Prince and Gabe Vincent, or perceived upgrades at the time, and didn't make a move. And then 2024, that was potentially flipping D'Lo once he opted in, and they decided not to, and then they decided to trade him in December, which like I think worked out with flipping him for DFS, and then you also do the Luka trade in February. My pushback or criticism of that is just that I think it disrupts continuity. And like a big point I was making last summer going into the season, which I did think bore out, was that if you're going to keep D'Lo, and again, ultimately they kept him a little bit past Christmas, but even that like 30 games or so, you basically throw that out, right? Like, I mean, there's certain things you can maybe take away, but for the most part, he was such a big part of their identity, both as a starter or a sixth man, that it was like, you're now learning how to play, like you're replacing a ball dominant scoring guard with a 3-and-D wing, and that's just like completely changes your identity. It changes how you play offensively, how you play defensively. So my thing with them preferring these in-season trades, because at this point it's a trend. If you look at Rob Pelinka's tenure, he prefers to make in-season trades. Like, yes, the prices potentially go down. Maybe there's some more options. Maybe a team suffers some injuries or they underperform and now they're looking to make a trade. Like, I get that perspective. I just think for yourself, you are potentially putting a ceiling on how good you can be, because we've seen now like teams rarely, unless you already have a certain infrastructure, you rarely make in-season moves that lead to winning a championship. Like, you know, maybe it's a back end tweak to like someone in, you know, the 8th or 9th man, but like we have a history now where I think the last time or the last couple of times teams made moves that won the title was the '04 Pistons with Rasheed Wallace and the Raptors with Marc Gasol. And like, those are the two exceptions. Everyone else, it's been even go like the Lakers, like the trade for Luka, and it does look good for a bit, but then they don't really, like, they clearly did not have the right continuity, that they had not gelled enough come playoff time. So I think my concern is if they do another trade 50 games into the season, all of a sudden you have 30 games with this new identity to figure things out. And that's probably not enough. Like, NBA history suggests you typically need 2 to 3 years with your core to put it together to win a title. So I just think it kind of cuts both your floor and your ceiling out a little bit from under you. Now, in terms of names, I haven't heard any names outside of Wiggins. And I think that speaks to the lack of right now wings that are just out there and the asking prices. And so I get from that perspective why like they're standing pat, and you don't want to make a bad deal, right? Just to make a deal. But at the same time, I do think if you're aggressive and you are willing to potentially include that first round pick, you can find something that upgrades the roster. So I in general, I'm a fan of building the roster in the offseason, having the continuity of a full season and seeing what you could do come playoff time. But with the way things are trending, it looks like they're probably going to not make a move this summer, go into the season, and then probably make a move sometime between December and February. And I get it. There's just some risk in that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear your points. I think I'm probably in the other camp to just wait and see. And I think my opinion on this is just to get more data and information on what players kind of stick, what players don't stick with, this new and improved Luka. I think we kind of sell ourselves short because of the trade that happened, mid-season. We didn't see, in my opinion, like Luka and Reeves and LeBron kind of clicking on all cylinders, like all the time. It was always like inconsistent. Like, one game was, on, one game was off. So I think I'd kind of like to see that and then parse through what, archetype of player fits best with what we have in terms of the players. And then obviously like this Ayton's is kind of a big piece to this, like to the puzzle. Like, how does he kind of fit into play? And I think there's a lot of upside there, but there can be a lot of downside too, like his motor and inconsistencies and him buying in and his past situations have had an impact. But I think where if we just look at Pelinka, anytime he's made an off-season trade, they have not been the best, right? So like, he's made that Russell Westbrook move. I think he made that Pat Beverly move. So his off-season, his track record for off-season moves has not been the best. So maybe that also is kind of clouding my judgment on him and his ability to make the right moves.
Some self-awareness, maybe. I mean, the other thing that I think though with it that I don't like is like it does give you a built-in excuse because they used it in 2023 and they used it again this summer. So it's been 2 of the last 3 summers where we do the exit interview and we start asking about the season and the off season and the future. And it's always, well, we only had 20 or 30 games with this group to really evaluate it. So like give us an off season, maybe we'll make a couple tweaks and then we'll go into next season. It's like, I don't think they're in a position to kick the can down the road. Like, again, unless they're just sort of accepting that whatever the ceiling of this team is the ceiling of this team. And they're just going to live with that. Like, I think if you can't really just be like, well, let's just see what we do in 2026, 27, right? Like at some point you have to kind of live in the moment and be like, no, we're going for it. We're not just thinking about like the next season and the next season. And sometimes it feels like they kind of have that attitude toward roster building of, we're going to build it later in the season. And then, the deal's probably better, which you give them credit for, but it kind of, again, I think kind of caps the ceiling and the floor of that current season. And then it kicks the can down the road to the following season. And then I think it's almost like a built-in excuse of like, well, we only had 20 games with this group. And like, but you had 20 games with the group because you chose to wait rather than making a move before the season.
Yeah, it's definitely a valid point with, waiting is not optimal because like you said, like how many moves have been made, mid-season that have led to a championship. And that's clearly the goal for the Lakers, right? It's not to get to the first round or second round. And maybe that player acquisition you make, in February helps you get to that point. I mean, for the Lakers in my show, it's called Rings and Things for a reason, right? So we want to continue to put up banners out there. So I hear you. I think, and you're in the room, so you can kind of like see the facial expressions, and you probably get the vibe even better than I do on video. So I totally hear you on that for sure. Want to get your thoughts on a topic here. So let's see. So the Lakers, we talked about where they would potentially finish. So how many moves would you say they're away from getting into that contender status? Like the West has really gotten even more challenging from last season. I think there's a clear, top 3, top 4 to the West, depending on, where you fall with Houston. But, OKC is still going to be, they re-upped all their guys. And I think there's probably still ceiling for them. Like there were some like warts that kind of came up in the postseason, but they were able to manage through it and play through it. And, SJ was great, but Jalen definitely impressed me. Like he like with his wrist and everything, he impressed me. And I think he just continue to get better there. And the moves Denver made, there were fantastic moves, like getting Cam Johnson. I think he's going to be such a good fit there. So talk to me about like where you if this is what the roster is for the Lakers right now, where do they fit within the Western Conference?
I currently view them with a range of 4 to 6 in the West. Okay. I think if everything goes right health-wise and things click, I think the 4 seed. And I know people, and to your point earlier, like they were the 3 seed last year, and in theory they should be better with training camp and summer to gel with some of the core guys and like some of the moves they made. However, I would look at, they were in a 3-way tie for the 3 seed with Denver and the Clippers. Yeah, they were just 1 game ahead of Minnesota, who was the 6 seed, and a couple games ahead of Golden State at the 7 seed. So it was a pretty closely jumbled West that if LeBron declines even from like wherever you want to put him in your player rankings this past season, I think he was clearly a top 10 guy. I voted for him first team All-NBA, the 5th spot, but he finished 6th in MVP, 6th in All-NBA overall. So like by at least the voters voted him the 6th best player in the season last season among the guys who qualified. So let's just say theoretically he's the 6th best player. If he declines to like the 15th best player or the 17th best player, which is still a really good player, that's like a 3rd team All-NBA candidate, I think that gap could be the difference between LA's 50 wins versus 48, which could be the difference between the 3 seed and the 7 seed. So I think as constructed, I would put them somewhere 4 to 6 in the mix with Minnesota and the Clippers, and those three teams jockeying through some order. I think Houston last year won 52 games. They were the 2 seed. I think they got better. I think they're deep. I think they're at least 2 deep at every position. They added their biggest thing was their half court offense, their crunch time offense. They addressed that with KD. So that's a team I expect to win in the mid 50s. Then Denver was tied with the Lakers, but I think they improved their roster more than the Lakers. I also think they were more impressive in the playoffs than the Lakers, going around 2 and beating the Clippers in 7 and taking OKC to 7. So I view Denver, Houston, and OKC as the top 3, not in that order, but just like I think those are going to be the 3 top seeds. And I see the Lakers in that next bucket, 4 to 6 with the Clippers and Timberwolves. So I mean, it's been interesting to see some of the Vegas stuff. Like most of Vegas has them between 5 and 7. So Vegas is a little bit lower on them. And I just saw ESPN just release their power rankings for next season, and they had the Lakers 7th, actually behind Golden State, which I found interesting given Golden State, the Kuminga situation, Horford, Melton, like they have a lot of balls up in the air right now. So I think that's a little too low for me, but gun to my head, I'd probably put them 5th right now and kind of split the difference between 4 and 6. But I think as constructed, they're somewhere in that range. Now, in terms of entering the contender mix, I think they're 1 trade away if it's the right player. So I actually don't mind the Wiggins package for the right player. So some Rui, a first, and Dalton, if you're giving me like a higher level 3-and-D wing, and I'm just going to throw a couple, like if you're giving me a Mikal Bridges or a Herb Jones, that to me is something that would make sense. And now Bridges went for 5 picks, so I don't see New York giving him up for that. And like Herb Jones just extended, and so there's some trade restrictions with him for a little bit. But like I think like that type of player, I'd be open to it. Wiggins is not quite at that level, but you get the right type of starting wing, I think they're right up there. If it's like a couple smaller moves or just like a smaller bench move, I think they're basically in the same range. Maybe they're like a little bit deeper, a little bit better, but I don't think it moves the needle enough. So I do think they need to make one more move to enter that OKC, Denver, Houston level. If not, I think they still have a puncher's chance. And with Luka and LeBron, I'm never going to count those 2 guys out. Like
for sure.
We've seen what they do in the playoffs. It's certainly capable with like a second year together that they at least make the second round. But realistically, I think looking at just how deep the West is, I have them 4 to 6 right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with all your points there. I mean, and I'll just add to it that if we do get this improved and slim Luka MVP kind of version, I think that will definitely elevate not only his play but also the players around him. And I think his 2-man game, like you said, like with Ayton, is going to have a huge impact. I think, we kind of saw the ceiling with Jackson Hayes, and he played as pretty much as best as he could, within his role. But I think that extra layer is just going to be really tough for defenses to figure out how to defend the Lakers, because they're going to be able to attack like so many different ways. Pick and roll, isolation, and what, or a 2-man game, or just have kind of those horn sets that they use a lot. There's just so much that they can do. And we kind of talked about it earlier in the pod, but like a lot of our questions are going to be kind of more on the defensive end. How much of it will you be able to provide resistance wise? And I agree. I think 1 move away, we can get to that kind of contender status. And if you kind of, the matchups break out right, you can get to, there's a pathway there. But I think that one move or that player has to be kind of like a perfect player that fits the lineup. It's got to be like a 3-and-D wing player that's young and athletic and fits the timeline. And I think that answer to that question is really challenging or difficult to kind of figure out. Because like you said, like Bridges is going to cost a lot. Herb Jones just re-extended with the Pelicans, so that's going to be challenging, I think. And I'm going to take it to this, like I'm going to turn the wheel a little bit here. I think you kind of have to be creative in looking for like kind of those gems. Like one player that I really like is Ochai Agbaji on the Toronto Raptors, and he's kind of in that mold where he's not a household name yet, right? And he fits a lot of the tools that, like, if you look at the metrics, a lot of these other players that we're talking about, like Wiggins and Bridges, and, salary-wise, he costs not much. But, I mean, if Toronto is really interested in really looking to build up their rookies and sophomores, then he may be in a crunch where you can get him on the cheap. But again, where I wanted to turn this around is we've talked about so much about Pelinka and the front office and a lot of these opinions in the room. One thing that we haven't been discussing overall in the offseason and we kind of forgotten about is Mark Walters coming into the ownership and the regime here. How much of it, and I think the latest report is, I think later in the fall, the sale kind of goes final. And I'm sure once that goes final, and, we saw the valuation for the Lakers for his stake that he's buying is insane in terms of a price. I really am curious, and I'm excited as a fan to see, because I didn't expect that the Bus family would sell this early, that they would hold on longer. I'm really interested in, I don't know if you have any thoughts or if you've heard anything that, once Mark Walters comes in, how much he's going to kind of jockey around and really get invested into the Lakers business. Because, if you look at his resume, his whole life is just winning at all margins, right? You don't get that successful without being cutthroat and making like tough decisions and throwing a bunch of money. And we have a real case example with the Dodgers already. Like they're a machine in terms of all the decision making, and I'm just excited to see that, positioned with the Lakers. So that's probably our last topic, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So my understanding is that, because the sale is unlikely to go through until the fall or potentially even as late as sometime in the winter, like definitely before the turn of the calendar year, but at some point here between maybe like September through December, it seems unlikely that there's going to be any grand changes to the team. Maybe we'll see some turnover before the season. Like I'm interested to see what happens with the assistant coaching staff, if they return all the same people, or maybe there's like a change or two. But I think it's unlikely that major changes happen to the staff or bolstering things until the sale is official. And then at that point, if it's likely going to be during the season, you're not really changing your front office or your medical staff, during once the season has started. That's just not really something that tends to happen unless someone's being like fired. But that's typically more like performance based. So I think realistically, next summer is the big summer in terms of transitioning. I think there's going to be a lot of evaluation this year in terms of the front office and how they operate, the medical staff, scouting, like all different facets of basketball ops and business ops as well, of just seeing how the lay of the land. I'm sure Mark is already aware of a lot of these things just by being a minority owner, but now being the majority owner and having technically it will be Genie as the governor, but I don't see him forking up almost $6 billion in cash and just kind of sitting back and not having any say over certain things. So I think he's going to be evaluating everything and putting smart people in place and really just expanding a lot of the departments where the Lakers have been one of these smaller organizations just in general. And if you look at pick a department, they might have like 2 or 3 people and the average NBA team has 5 or 6. So I think it's not even necessarily about making like the big changes of like who's in charge of certain things, but more so giving that person more resources to do their job better and adding more staff to just operate at a higher level. So I think that's where we're going to see things change the most. It's just going to be next summer, adding a lot more staff, and we'll probably see a bit of a spending spree. So again, that could, depending on when things close, happen potentially before the start of the season, like some of those things. But I think the bigger turnover will start next summer.
Yeah, no, I that totally makes sense. And I think fans just have to be patient. This is such a large deal. It just takes time. If you look at any deals that happen within the business workplace, it just takes time with like the legal, the finances and whatnot. And, there could be some like agreements here and that they just need to kind of sign off on. So, but I do think though, like there's hope, right? Like, I don't think that he spends all this money and just, sits at bay and doesn't make any improvements or changes. And a lot of the changes may just go under the radar. They just they may not get marketed or maybe there's some reports here and there. But like you said, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard it. The Lakers don't have a pro scouting department. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that that's the case. But if they decide to invest in that, that's where I kind of wanted to link it to. But if you have a pro scouting department, you're sitting at different teams, arenas, and games, and that's your kind of viewpoint of identifying an O'Shea Agbaji, for example, and then you report then bring that up to like the front office and Plinka and those decision makers to be like, that's a type of player that, you know, I'd be willing to give up a first round pick, Dalton Connect, and whatever the salary is, and, you know, make it unprotected. And I feel like that's not there. Like a lot of the names is like that we are always tied to is just like big names, and kind of like that's just the way things have been. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like if a lot of the departments are you know, 2 people, 3 people, like you said, an average NBA team has like 5, 6, 7. Like if you just look at it from like a business standpoint, like it's not going to be operating in terms of like excellence. Like the Lakers spend their money for sure. I know there's a lot of the commentary about like penny pinching and whatnot, but they're always, you know, spending in tax and whatnot. But I'm excited for that moment. Once he joins, and I'm sure he's going to start like his assessment, or he probably already knows, like he probably already has a plan in place and how he wants to execute it. And, you know, he may just go out and hit a home run and try to give a blank check to Sam Presti. Who knows? You know what I mean? Like he has that spending power, which is the exciting thing. Real quickly here, before we get you out of here, Jovan, I appreciate you stopping by. I got a kind of fun rapid fire quick hitter where, you know, take it however you want. I'll just ask you quick questions, and then we'll end the show from there. So, all right, first question. Will Dalton Connect be on the Lakers roster before, next season by the trade deadline?
I'll say no. I think it's close to 50-50, but I'll lean slightly no.
Yeah, he did not do us a solid in Vegas.
No, he did not.
Will the front office trade away that first round pick?
I'm going to say no. Okay. I think they're going to keep that pick for the foreseeable future, to have that flexibility that we talked about earlier with potentially acquiring a superstar or even just, you know, with again looking at how much Desmond Bane goes for 4 picks. Well, maybe you're not looking to get like that caliber of player, but somewhere in between like a Bane and a Wiggins, you might need a couple picks, and having that flexibility I think is important. So because they are so limited with their tradable first round picks over the next couple of years, I think they're going to try to operate within Rui, you know, the expirings and Dalton, and maybe a second or swaps, but not the first. Okay.
I agree. Is LeBron James a Laker next year?
Yeah, I think so. 2026, 27, I would lean no, but 2025, 26, yes.
Okay. Does Luka Doncic win MVP next year?
I'll say yes. I think he should be the favorite.
Okay. And this was a fun topic, and you can take it how you want. But Daryl Morey decided to get in front of a mic somewhere. Where do you value this bubble championship? I feel like if it was any other team that won that championship, we probably never hear about this Mickey Mouse ring, or like there's an asterisk. But because the Lakers won, you know, there's this narrative that this ring doesn't count. It's in Orlando. I mean, I'm sure you've talked about it a bunch on your pod and in your show, but like before the bubble, the Lakers were the best team in the NBA. They had just beat Milwaukee Bucks and the Clippers right before the COVID, the pandemic hit. And I believe they started the season something crazy like 24-6 or something. Like they were clearly the best team in the NBA. Maybe there's like some conversation of like the Clippers and Lakers, as there was so much hype coming into the season, but I don't think that this bubble, this 4-month hiatus, really benefited the Lakers. I mean, it helped every team. Like they all benefited from this gap. And when the Lakers came into the bubble, they lost like I think their 6 first games. Like they looked rusty as hell. They did not look good. It wasn't until they lost their first game in the first round of the playoffs, which was against the Portland Trailblazers. Then they started to kind of click, and everything came about. And I think it was maybe like the first 2 rounds where they dropped the first game, and you know ended up winning the next 4 games in those series, and then ultimately winning the championship. But yeah, I wanted to get close here and get your thoughts on that piece of it.
I think that championship is the hardest championship in NBA history, just based on the circumstances of being locked away at Disney World and having to quarantine and social distance and just being in the same place for, I think the Lakers ended up being there just over like 100 days from start to finish.
That's insane. That's insane.
So it's just like that's crazy. And I think the one thing in retrospect, and I think there's been some data analysis on this, is like there were some outlier shooting performances in the bubble, just looking at how guys shot either earlier that season or how they've shot in their career. And I think if we look at like AD clearly shot better in the bubble. I think Rondo and Caruso both shot well. KCP shot well, but like they weren't the only team that benefited from that. Miami was another example of a team that benefited from that. And like, sure, there's maybe some shot variance overall within the bubble, but like, I mean, at the time I was covering the Clippers, and like that was a team that completely crumbled under the pressure of the bubble and like did not want to be there. And I think like you just, like it really just came down to like who wanted to be there, who was able to block out all the things going on. And of course, like these guys are human, so it makes sense that for some people there were some things they couldn't block out or just like a lot to handle. But I think given the circumstances, it's actually the toughest championship of all time. And sure, like they didn't have fans in the stand, but like the Lakers were going to be the 1 seed. They were going to have home court advantage throughout the playoffs. So I don't really buy that. And especially, I know they were jockeying with Milwaukee, but with how it played out, like they were clearly going to have home court over Miami. So I don't really buy that narrative either of like crypto.com, back then Staples, like that's always been a great home court advantage for the Lakers. So I don't really buy the argument that really mattered either. So if anything, as like the 1 seed, that was like a disadvantage that they didn't have home court. They didn't have their crowd. So people are going to say whatever they want to say, and people have loved to take shots at the bubble. But I agree with you. I think if someone else had won it, like if Miami had won it, we would probably be talking about them as like this Cinderella team, kind of similar to like the 2011 Mavericks, and they'd be glorified and championed, kind of propped up through NBA history. And because it was the Lakers, and I think also to a lesser extent LeBron, like then it gets discounted.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, Jovan, thank you so much. I appreciate you hopping on the show. You want to let everyone know where they can find the good work that you put out there?
Yeah, check out Buha's Block on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also at Jovan Buha on all social platforms. And I appreciate you having me on. Glad we're able to do this, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for everyone for stopping by. Take care. Peace.